In Umu-Oka, we have two types of silence. The silence of the dead, and the silence of my Uncle Namdi's dance. One brings peace, the other is a war no one else can see. The narrative starts with the sound of a phone camera shutter. Kiki is posing, babe, take another one, this lighting is giving rustic chic realness. She's positioned her designer handbag on a yam mound like it's a photo shoot prop. Behind her, the village women stop pounding cassava to stare. The tension is immediate. Mama Grace, my mother, watches from the kitchen doorway, her arms folded across her chest in that way that promises consequences. She notices Kiki stepping carefully around the clay water pot because it might dirty her Fenty slides. The stakes are set clear as morning. If Kiki cannot adapt, if she continues treating our compound like content for her followers, Mama Grace would demand my brother divorce her, ending Kiki's marriage and the soft life she came here chasing. But none of them are looking at what I'm looking at. Uncle Namdi, in the far corner of the compound, dancing without music while the shadows around him move in ways shadows shouldn't move. The phone disappeared before breakfast. Kiki tore through the bedroom my brother Chokudi had prepared, checking under pillows, behind the wooden wardrobe, in the folds of the wrapper she'd refused to tie properly. Where is it? Chokudi, your mother took my phone. My brother stood in the doorway, caught between his wife and the woman who'd raised him. He opened his mouth, but Mama Grace's voice cut through from the courtyard. If you want it back, come to the stream. It was 4 a.m. The sky was still purple dark, and the air held that particular cold that settles in the hours before dawn. Kiki appeared in designer pajamas, silk, with her initials embroidered on the pocket, staring at the bucket Mama Grace held out to her. I don't understand. The stream is 2 kilometers that way. Mama Grace pointed into the darkness. We fetch water before the sun rises. Every day. If you want to be part of this family, you carry what we carry. I watched Kiki's face cycle through disbelief, anger, then something close to panic as she realized Mama Grace wasn't joking. Around us, other women were already moving, buckets balanced on their heads, their feet knowing the path by memory. This is insane, Kiki whispered. Chokudi, tell her. Go with them, my brother said quietly. Please. The look Kiki gave him could have drawn blood. She took the bucket. I followed at a distance, watching her stumble on paths the other women walked like breathing. Her slides kept catching on roots. Twice she stopped to check her manicure by moonlight. And when we finally reached the stream, cold and dark and smelling of earth and old rain, she stood at the bank like she was facing execution. Feel it, Mama Grace said. Carry it back. This is day one of your reset. Behind us, Uncle Namdi's humming drifted through the pre-dawn darkness, a sound that made the other women pause mid-motion, their faces turning towards something I still couldn't quite see. Chief Anichuku discovered the silence when he tried to call his youngest wife for breakfast. His mouth opened. His throat worked. But the command that should have thundered through his compound came out as nothing, just empty air, just the shape of words with no sound to fill them. By the time the sun had fully risen, half the village knew. The chief who had ruled Umu-Oka for 30 years, whose voice could settle disputes and pronounce judgments, had been struck mute in the night. And on his doorstep, spreading like a stain, was grey dust that shouldn't exist. I heard about it from Adana, whose mother had been there when the chief's wives began to panic. They are saying it's a curse, she whispered, her eyes wide. They are saying someone in the village has offended the ancestors. I thought of Uncle Namdi, still dancing in our compound while Kiki complained about her blistered feet and ruined manicure. Still moving to rhythms no one else could hear. Look, Adana grabbed my arm, pointing toward the chief's palace. At the gates, barely visible in the midday sun, something moved. Not shadow exactly, more like the absence of light, a darkness that held shape without substance. It drifted along the compound walls like smoke, testing for weaknesses. The elders gathered in emergency council, all of them speaking in hushed tones while their leader sat silent, his eyes wild with the terror of a man who'd lost his greatest weapon. That evening, Mama Grace called me to help with dinner preparations. Kiki was there too, her hands wrapped in bandages from the morning's water carrying, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. The chief's silence is a warning, Mama Grace said, not looking up from the yams she was peeling. Something is waking. Something we've been protected from for longer than most of you remember. Protected by what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Mama Grace's knife paused mid-stroke. By the dance everyone mocks. By the man everyone calls mad. By your Uncle Namdi, who holds back darkness while the village calls him shame. Pastor Jeremiah arrived on Sunday with certainty wrapped around him like armor. He was a thick man with soft hands and a voice trained to command attention, to fill rooms and silence doubts. He'd heard about the chief's affliction, about the grey dust, about the shadow at the palace gates. And he had diagnosed the problem with the confidence of a man who'd never encountered a mystery he couldn't solve with scripture. Witchcraft, he declared from the pulpit, his voice booming through the small church. Demonic activity in our midst. And I know exactly where it's coming from. I felt my stomach drop. There is a man in this village, the pastor continued, who moves like one possessed. Who dances without music, who speaks to things we cannot see. The Okori family has harbored this demon for too long, and now we all suffer the consequences of their tolerance. Chokudi shifted beside me, his jaw tight. Kiki, who'd been half asleep through most of the service, suddenly looked alert. I have built a cage of deliverance, Pastor Jeremiah announced. I am blessed with holy water and anointed with oil. 3 days of prayer and fasting will drive out whatever spirit has taken hold of this man. The chief will speak again. The shadows will flee. But only if we act. The congregation murmured agreement. I saw heads nodding, saw the relief on their faces. Finally, someone with a solution. Finally, someone who could explain the unexplainable and fix what had broken. After the service, the pastor came to our compound. Mama Grace met him at the gate, her body a wall between him and the house. You're not taking him. Sister Grace, I understand your loyalty to family, but you understand nothing. Her voice was quiet, deadly. You come here with your iron cage and your certainty, and you don't even know what you're caging. A demon. A guardian, she said. The only thing standing between this village and the darkness you're too blind to see properly. But Pastor Jeremiah had brought the elders with him. 7 men who'd lost their voices or their peace, who carried grey dust on their shoes and fear in their eyes. 7 men who wanted answers, solutions, normalcy. They wanted the dancing to stop. And they had the authority to make it happen. Kiki lasted 3 more days before she tried to run. I found her packing at midnight, stuffing her designer clothes into a suitcase that had cost more than most families in Umu-Oka earned in a month. Her hands were shaking, and in the candlelight, I could see she'd been crying. I can't do this anymore, she whispered when she noticed me in the doorway. The water, the cooking, the way everyone looks at me like I'm performing for them. Your mother took my phone again today because I tried to call my friend. She said I was distracted from my duties. Duties. Like I'm some kind of servant. Where will you go? Anywhere. Back to Lagos. Back to civilization. She zipped the suitcase with shaking hands. Chokudi can come or not. I don't care anymore. This whole village is insane. She left through the back gate, dragging her suitcase through red dust that would ruin its wheels. I should have stopped her. Should have called for Chokudi or Mama Grace. But something kept me silent, watching her disappear into the darkness that pressed too close around our compound. The forest path to the main road cut through thick bush, trees that grew so dense they blocked out the moon. Kiki had her phone's flashlight. Mama Grace must have missed it in her evening inspection, and she followed its weak beam like a lifeline. She made it halfway before the light went out. Not died. Went out. As if something had reached through the screen and pinched it dark. In the silence that followed, Kiki heard breathing that wasn't her own. She ran. The path twisted, branches grabbing at her clothes, her hair, her skin. Behind her, the breathing grew closer, accompanied by footsteps that sounded wet, heavy, wrong. She could smell it now, rot and old earth and something underneath that made her stomach heave. The grey dust began to appear on the path ahead of her, spreading like a living thing, blocking her escape. That's when she saw them. The shadows. Not one, but dozens. Taking shape between the trees, their forms twisted into something that might have been human once, before hunger had rotted them into something else. They moved toward her with the patience of things that had waited decades for this exact moment. Kiki screamed. And from somewhere behind her, still distant but getting closer, she heard a sound that shouldn't have brought relief but somehow did. Uncle Namdi's humming, cutting through the darkness like a blade. Mama Grace found Kiki at dawn, curled against our compound wall, her designer clothes torn and muddy, her suitcase abandoned somewhere in the forest. She didn't speak about what she'd seen. Couldn't, maybe. She just let Mama Grace guide her inside, let her hands be wrapped in fresh bandages, let hot tea be pressed into her shaking fingers. I should have gone to bed. Should have pretended I hadn't seen Uncle Namdi return hours after Kiki, his body covered in scratches that looked like claw marks, his feet bleeding from dancing on ground that shouldn't have torn skin. But something kept me awake, watching. Near midnight, I saw Mama Grace slip out of the house, carrying a clay bowl that steamed in the cool air. She moved like a woman who'd walked this path 1,000 times, her feet finding every stone, every root, every safe place to step in darkness. I followed. She went to Uncle Namdi's room, the small hut at the edge of our compound that everyone pretended wasn't there. Through the crack in the door, I watched her kneel beside him, pressing the bowl to his lips. "Drink," she whispered. "You need your strength for what's coming." Uncle Namdi drank, his movement slow, exhausted. Then Mama Grace began to hum. The same rhythm Uncle Namdi used when he danced. The same pattern, the same pauses, the same impossible complexity that seemed to hold meaning I couldn't quite grasp. 1, 2, 3, hold, she whispered. Feel the barrier, Namdi. Feel where it's weakening. The pastor's cage will come tomorrow, and when they take you, the village will be exposed. We need to strengthen what we can while we can. Uncle Namdi's eyes opened, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look at something directly. At Mama Grace. At my mother, who I'd always known was special but never understood how. You see them too, he said. His voice was rough from disuse, from years of choosing humming over words. I've always seen them, Mama Grace replied. Since I was a girl. That's why your brother married me, he needed someone who could guide the dance when his eyes grew tired. Someone who could see the weak points in the barrier. Someone who could teach the next guardian when the time came. My breath caught. Does Obinna know? Uncle Namdi asked. Not yet. But he will. The sight runs in our blood too, passed through the women, activated by proximity to the dance. He's been watching you more carefully these past weeks. Soon, he'll start to see what we see. As if summoning me, Mama Grace looked toward the door. Toward the crack where I was hiding. Come in, Obinna, she said. It's time you understood what you're inheriting. Maybe some stories choose their listeners long before the telling begins, waiting for the moment when denial becomes impossible, when the truth you've been avoiding stands in front of you wearing your mother's face and asking you to finally see what's been there all along. Dibia Okofor arrived the next morning, older than memory and bent like a question mark, carrying herbs that smelled like prophecy. The village women gathered in our compound, not just Mama Grace's friends, but the elders' wives, the market women, even the ones who'd whispered loudest about Uncle Namdi's shame. They came because the Dibia had requested it, and in Umu-Oka, you didn't refuse the Dibia. The girl will cook, he announced, pointing one gnarled finger at Kiki. Kiki, who'd barely emerged from her room since the forest incident, looked up with red-rimmed eyes. I can't. You will cook the meal of protection, Dibia Okofor continued, as if she hadn't spoken. The women will teach you. And through the cooking, you will understand what you married into. What followed was less a lesson and more a ritual I'd never witnessed before. The women brought ingredients I'd seen 100 times, yam, palm oil, bitter leaf, crayfish, peppers. But the way they prepared them was different. Mama Grace showed Kiki how to pound the yam in a specific rhythm, the peso striking the mortar in patterns that matched Uncle Namdi's humming. 1, 2, 3, pause, Mama Grace instructed. The pause is when you listen. When you feel whether the barrier holds. Other women added ingredients one at a time, each addition accompanied by words spoken so quietly I had to strain to hear. Not prayers exactly. More like commands. Anchors. Promises made to things that existed between the physical and the spiritual. Kiki's hands shook as she walked, but she didn't stop. Couldn't, maybe. Something in the rhythm had caught her, pulled her in, made her part of something larger than her resistance. The soft life you came seeking, Umu-Oka said, watching her walk, was never about rest. It was about being protected. Every day you've been here, every task you've been given, you've been weaving protection without knowing it. The water you carry feeds the barrier. The food you cook strengthens it. The women who've been resetting you have been preparing you for this moment. I don't understand, Kiki whispered. You will. He turned to Mama Grace. When do they come for him? Tonight. Pastor Jeremiah has gathered the elders. They'll bring the cage after dark. Umu-Oka nodded slowly. Then we have until sunset to prepare the women's circle. The dance alone cannot hold what's coming. It will take all of you, every woman who's learned the rhythm, whether she knows it or not. He looked at Kiki with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. Your city life taught you to curate, to perform, to present. But survival in Umu-Oka requires the opposite. It requires you to become invisible enough that the real work can happen through you. Today, you begin learning what your husband's family has protected for generations. Today, you stop being the bride and become the guardian's shield. The food Kiki cooked that day fed 30 women. And each one who ate it felt something shift inside them, a awareness settling in their bones, a rhythm starting in their blood. The preparation for a battle most of them didn't yet know they'd have to fight. They came for Uncle Namdi as the sun set, painting the sky the color of old wounds. Pastor Jeremiah led the group, 7 elders, 3 church ushers, and the iron cage they'd blessed with prayers that meant nothing to the things Uncle Namdi had been fighting. The cage was large enough for a man to crouch but not stand, with bars thick as my wrist. Brother Namdi, the pastor called out, his voice carrying false warmth. We've come to help you. 3 days of deliverance, and you'll be free of whatever spirit has tormented you all these years. Uncle Namdi stopped dancing. For the first time since I'd started watching him properly, he stood completely still. If I stop, he said, his voice carrying across the compound with unexpected clarity, you will all die screaming within a week. The elders shifted uncomfortably. Chief Aneyechukwu, still mute, made frantic gestures that no one could interpret. That's the demon speaking, Pastor Jeremiah said smoothly. That's the fear it uses to maintain control. But we have faith, Brother Namdi. Faith that God is stronger than any witchcraft. This isn't witchcraft, Mama Grace stepped forward. This is protection. Ancient protection. If you cage him, the barrier falls. The shadows will come. And your faith won't stop them because they were here before your church, before your Bible, before your certainty told you that anything you don't understand must be evil. But the pastor had the elders with him, and the elders had the village's fear driving them forward. They'd lost their voices, their peace, their sense of safety. They needed someone to blame, something to fix, a simple answer to questions that had no simple parts. They grabbed Uncle Namdi. He didn't fight. That was the worst part. He simply let them drag him toward the cage, his eyes finding mine across the compound. Watch, he said to me. Remember everything you see in the next 3 days. You need it when your turn comes. The cage door clanged shut. The lock clicked home. And the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. The cold that followed wasn't natural, wasn't the cool of evening or the chill of harmattan wind. This cold came from somewhere else, somewhere the sun had never reached. It settled over Umu-Oka like a burial shroud, freezing water in buckets, killing chickens in their coops, making breath visible in air that should have been warm. In the palace, Chief Aneyechukwu collapsed, his body seizing as more than just his voice was stolen. In the church, candles wouldn't light. In the market, the grey dust began to spread, coating everything it touched with the smell of graves. And at the edges of the village, the shadows grew bold, taking shape in broad daylight, walking through walls like they owned the space and we were the intruders. Pastor Jeremiah tried to pray. The word stuck in his throat, frozen like everything else. Mama Grace gathered the women in our compound, their faces tight with fear but their hands steady. The meal you prepared today, she told them. The rhythms you learned. It's time to remember them. Our men have caged our guardian. Now we must become the barrier ourselves. Kiki stood among them, her designer clothes replaced with a wrapper tied properly for the first time, her hands no longer shaking. Tell us what to do, she said. And outside, in the cage, Uncle Namdi began to scream as the spirits he'd held back for 20 years finally reached him, punishing him for his forced stillness with violence no iron bars could prevent. I woke to screaming, not Uncle Namdi's anymore, but the whole village, every compound at once. The shadows had stopped testing the barriers and started claiming territory. They poured through Umu-Oka like flood water, taking shape in every corner, every doorway, every space where light failed to reach. In the cage, Uncle Namdi's body convulsed. His skin split open in places, wounds appearing from invisible strikes. But his feet were moving, even cramped in that small space, still trying to perform the dance that the iron bars wouldn't allow him to complete. The women had formed a circle in our compound, 30 of them humming the rhythm Mama Grace had taught them. Their voices created a fragile barrier, just enough to keep the shadows at bay. But it wasn't enough. Without the dance, without the full ritual, they were holding back a flood with cupped hands. Pastor Jeremiah ran through the village, his certainty finally shattered, trying to unlock church doors that wouldn't open, calling on a God who seemed as silenced as the chief. That's when the shadows showed their true forms. Not just darkness. Not just the absence of light. They were the hungry dead spirit of those who'd been denied burial rites, who'd died with debts unpaid, who'd been forgotten so thoroughly they'd rotted into rage. Their faces were holes. Their hands were too long. Their mouths opened too wide, revealing nothing but more darkness inside. They pulled at the living, trying to drag them down into whatever cold place they inhabited. In the compound, Mama Grace's voice rose above the others. Kiki. The rhythm, you learned it in the cooking. Stamp it out. Give him something to follow. Kiki looked terrified, but her feet began to move. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. The same pattern she'd pounded into yam, now pounded into earth. Other women joined her, their feet finding the rhythm, their bodies becoming the drums Uncle Namdi needed to complete what the cage prevented. In the iron prison, Uncle Namdi's eyes opened. His body was broken, bleeding, pushed past every human limit. But when the women's feet found the rhythm, something in him responded. He couldn't dance fully, the cage wouldn't allow it. But his shoulders could move. His hands could trace patterns in the air. His voice could carry the humming that bound the rhythm to its purpose. The cage began to rattle. Not from his strength. From the frequency. From the vibration of dozens of women stamping the same pattern into earth that had heard it for generations. From the sound waves that matched some fundamental frequency the iron couldn't withstand. The lock shattered first. Then the hinges. Finally, the bars themselves began to bend, to warp, to break under pressure that shouldn't have existed. Uncle Namdi stood. The shadows rushed forward, sensing their moment. If they could take him now, weakened and wounded, the barrier would fall forever. But Uncle Namdi didn't run. Didn't retreat. He danced. Not the clumsy, embarrassing movements the village had mocked. This was warfare. Each step created light where his feet struck ground. Each turn of his wrist carved boundaries the shadows couldn't cross. His blood painted protection symbols in the air, temporary but powerful. The women's rhythm held him up when his own strength would have failed. Their voices guided him when his vision blurred. And Kiki, city girl Kiki, who'd come seeking a soft life, stamped the rhythm louder than anyone, her face fierce with understanding she hadn't possessed a week ago. The shadows broke against Uncle Namdi's dance like waves against stone, shrieking as they dissolved, retreating into whatever darkness had birthed them. And in the palace, Chief Aneyechukwu's mouth opened, and sound finally emerged, not speech yet, but a gasp of air that meant the silence was breaking. Dawn came slowly, reluctant, as if unsure whether the world it revealed was safe to illuminate. The grey dust began to recede, pulled back by the light and by Uncle Namdi's continued dancing. His feet traced patterns through the village center, his movements weaker now but still precise, still holding the barrier in place while it regenerated. Chief Anayuchuku stood in the square, his wife supporting him on either side. When he opened his mouth, the first words in a week emerged rough and humbled. "I was wrong," he said. "Forgive me." Pastor Jeremiah knelt in the dust, his cage of deliverance broken into pieces around him. He didn't speak. Couldn't, maybe. His certainty had been the first casualty of the night, and he'd need time to build something new from the rubble. Dibia Okofor moved through the crowd, his walking stick striking the ground in rhythms that made my bones ache with recognition. He stopped in front of each shadow-touch person, reading signs only he could see, pronouncing treatments that required herbs and prayers and time. When he reached Uncle Namdi, still dancing though blood ran from his nose and ears, the Dibia laid a hand on his shoulder. "You can rest now," he said. "The barrier holds. The women know the rhythm. The circle is complete." Uncle Namdi stopped moving for the second time in 20 years. He collapsed into Mama Grace's arms, unconscious before he hit the ground. The village women carried him home, their feet still remembering the rhythm, their bodies still humming with the frequency they'd learned. They laid him on his mat while Mama Grace prepared medicines from knowledge that ran deeper than any teaching. In the compound, Kiki sat with her back against the wall, her designer clothes ruined beyond saving, her manicure destroyed, her soft life thoroughly reset. But when I looked at her face, I didn't see defeat. I saw understanding. "The shadows," she said quietly. "They were always there, weren't they? In Lagos, in the city, everywhere. We just had better lights to hide them. Louder music to drown out the sounds they make. More distractions to keep us from seeing what's real." Mama Grace nodded. "The difference in Umu-Oka is that we've always known they were there. We've just forgotten how to talk about it. Forgotten that some knowledge can't be explained, only experienced. Only inherited through blood and ritual and the willingness to look foolish in service of protection." Chief Anayuchuku entered our compound, his voice still rough but functional. "The council has voted," he said. "We will build a shrine to honor the guardians. We will teach our children the truth. And we will never again mistake protection for madness." He looked at Uncle Namdi's still form with something like reverence. "How long until he wakes?" he asked. "Days, maybe weeks," Mama Grace said. "He pushed past every limit. His body needs to remember how to be human again instead of a barrier. And when he wakes, they dance." "The dance continues," I said, and everyone turned to look at me. "That's what he told me. The ritual must be passed down. The next guardian must be trained." Mama Grace's hand found mine, her grip tight with pride and sorrow and the weight of knowledge she'd always known I'd have to carry. "Yes," she said. "The next guardian must be trained. And the women who support him must remain strong. Because the shadows don't die, Obina. They only wait. And someone must always be watching." 3 weeks later, Kiki posted her first video since arriving in Umu-Oka. But it wasn't the content she'd planned. No rustic chic aesthetics. No poverty core performance. Just her hands, working clay into a water pot, while in the background, you could hear the women humming. "This is the soft life I was looking for," she said to the camera, her voice different now, quieter, steadier, real. "Not the one where everything comes easy. The one where you're held by something stronger than yourself. Where your work matters because it's part of a protection you can't see but can feel." The comment section exploded, as it always did. But Kiki no longer checked them obsessively. She'd found something in Umu-Oka that social media couldn't offer, a place in a story larger than her own, a purpose that didn't require performance. In the compound, Uncle Namdi had finally woken. His body was thinner, marked by the battle he'd fought, but his eyes were clear. "You ready?" he asked me. I wasn't. But readiness wasn't the point. I stepped into the space beside him and let my feet find the first position. 1, 2, 3, pause. The pause where you listen. Where you feel whether the barrier holds. where you become aware of the thin places between words. Uncle Namdi's hand corrected my stance, his voice guiding me through movements that would take years to master. The dance isn't about perfection, he said. It's about consistency. About showing up every day, even when people call you mad. Even when it cost you everything you thought you wanted. Mama Grace watched from the doorway, Kiki beside her. Both of them humming now, their voices creating the foundation the dance required. Around the village, life had returned to normal, or what passed for normal in a place that had finally remembered its own history. Children played in the square where Uncle Namdi had fought the shadows. Market women sold their goods where grey dust had once spread. Chief Aneyuchuku held counsel, his voice fully returned, his judgment tempered by the humility of having been silenced. But at the edges, at the thin places where light met dark, where the living world pressed against the other side, the shadows still watched. Waiting. Patient. Eternal. And in the Okori compound, a new guardian learned the steps that would hold them back. My feet found the rhythm. My body learned the language. And somewhere between the movement and the music no one else could hear, I understood what Uncle Namdi had known all along. The soft life was never about ease. It was about being part of something that mattered enough to fight for. About carrying weight that would crush you if you carried it alone, but became bearable when shared across generations. About dancing not because you wanted to, but because the alternative, the silence, the shadows, the hunger of forgotten things, was too terrible to allow. Kiki returned to the stream the next morning, bucket balanced on her head, her feet knowing the path by memory now. And when she passed other women on the trail, they didn't whisper anymore. They hummed. All of them keeping the rhythm. All of them part of the protection. All of them finally understanding that the reset was never punishment. It was an invitation into the only soft life that mattered, the one where you were held safe by hands you'd learn to trust, voices you'd learn to join, and a dance that would never, could never, must never stop.